Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Hacks Season 1, Episode 1. It's called There Is No Line, and I will start spoiler free because it is a pilot. You're thinking, why am I talking about this? This came out on HBO Max in May, and it is now January the following year. So basically there wasn't a lot of pilots launching in December, so I gave the patrons a bunch of pilots that had some critical acclaim that I never did, and this was the one that won. This was actually like the vote from November, and then December was just too busy. So here I am, going to talk about Hacks Episode 1. It is a comedy starring Jean Smart, and it is about a stand-up comedian who performs in Vegas multiple nights a week, and she is basically Shooter McGavin's in this, right? Shooter McGavin from Happy Gilmore, you know who I'm talking about. He eats pieces of shit for breakfast, of course, but he also is in charge of the casino and the establishment where she currently performs, right? And he wants to like cut her dates, and that's kind of the jumping off point of the show, which is that she's maybe seeing herself starting to be phased out as this older comedian who's going to be replaced by these younger acts. And the premise of the show is that she's going to ultimately team up with this young writer, this young woman named Ava, who has got in a bit of trouble because of something she tweeted, and no one's hiring her, but she ends up being thrown together with Jean Smart's character, and maybe together they'll like reinvigorate her comedy career, and they'll be good for each other, who knows. That's the general premise, and this episode is really just about setting up who each of them are individually, and then they don't meet until the end of the episode, so there's not actually a whole lot to spoil here outside of maybe specific jokes, because it is definitely a comedy. And I suppose the first thing I'll say that's really positive is that it's actually very funny. I found myself laughing quite a bit during this. Not everything landed. It's also a very stylish single camera comedy. The opening of the show is a single camera shot, which is like the end of her act, so she's telling some jokes on stage, and we're looking at her from behind, and we never see her face for a while. Like we just stay on her back, and we follow her like through the back of so the set finishes, she goes back and she says like hi and hello to some people. There were some showgirls who are walking up to the stage or whoever else, and it's not until she gets to her dressing room and sits in front of the mirror that we finally see her face. And it's a really stylistic opening, and I'm sure it's not going to be doing too much of that every episode. It feels like an episode 1. We're going to have a really stylish moment to kick this off, and that's kind of neat. And then it introduces what her life is like, and then we're introduced to Ava and how she's struggling, and they both happen to have the same agent, which is how they end up getting linked up together. And that's basically it. I mean, I think what I'll say is that both characters are funny. I think the episode is quite smart in that it lets us get to know both of them in both of the situations and how funny they are individually before it throws them together. And then when it does put them together and they're in a room, it kind of lives up to what you're hoping it's going to be, given how they are with other people. Deborah is, she's older, she's very quick to fly off the handle. The scene with Shooter McGavin where he tries to tell her that, hey, I'm going to take some of your dates away and give them to younger people. Like, the way she reacts, I wouldn't say it's justified necessarily. I will say this. If I have and this is not really a big deal because it's a comedy, so I don't necessarily have to think that the main character's in the right for their opinion. It's actually okay if I don't agree with her. But her attitude here reminds me a lot of like older wrestlers who are refusing to leave and like let the younger talent have the spotlight. It kind of feels like she's clinging on to like the stage time, and a part of me was thinking, shouldn't you be winding down? I mean, he's not taking away all your dates, he's just taking away some of them. So I don't know if I got quite just how of an offensive thing this was. It felt like she was maybe being a little entitled, just a smidge. But that said, though, her reaction is very funny, and the way she reacts to him, some of the lines she drops are great. There's a particular joke about our demographic, which I'll mention at the end when I've given the spoiler warning, but that really made me laugh. And the way she reacts to people around her, the way she tells them to F off, like her general attitude is very entertaining. And then similarly, Ava we're introduced to, and she is introduced quite quickly with a sort of a gimmick, and her gimmick is that she's very blunt. She just says whatever she is thinking, whatever she wants to say. The example that's given right near the start of her introduction is that she mentions just casually that she was fingered at her, like it was her uncle's mass, you know, mass, not mass. Her uncle's wake is what I was trying to say. I was getting my Catholic terms mixed up. But anyway, so and it's like, oh, she just blurts out awkward things like that, and at first it kind of felt like, oh, this is, I don't know if this will work. This is a bit gimmicky. Like she's going to like say things like this. But credit to the writing and credit to the actor, because by the end of the episode, like the way she would deliver certain lines really made some of them work, and some of them were so absurd with like just how open she would be, you know, about admitting something. It's like you see it coming, but the actual sentence is so surreal and funny on its own that it kind of works anyway. That I kind of like, you know, I got into it, and then but by the time the two of them meet, there's a little bit of pleasantries because neither of them really wanted to meet the other one, and then once they actually kind of unleash and they start effectively having a verbal fight, then they both start sniping with some of their best stuff, and it kind of feels like, oh, you've built both of these people up as being really biting and witty and snarky and like all these things, and then you put them in a room together, and then all of a sudden when they actually have a reason to finally just go at each other with their strength, it kind of creates some magic, with one or two minor exceptions. I will say part of the big meeting is that they end up kind of like forming a joke together and kind of like almost workshopping it in a fight till it's like the best it can be, and I don't actually think that joke itself is very funny. And I don't think that's a big deal, because ultimately the material that they create for her stand-up comedy in the show, that doesn't necessarily have to work for us, the audience. Like that can just kind of be like the comedy's working in the context for the characters, but it's more them creating and like being with each other and how they interact with other people that's going to be the humor, and that's what it is in this first episode. So I would say this first episode is quite successful. I would say Hacks episode 1, like I said, I looked for shows that had critical acclaim of some kind, and I had never heard of this. This completely passed me by, and I think this first episode is very witty, at times a little charming, and it kind of feels like, you know, it's an odd partnership. It's this odd coupling kind of idea of this young, snarky writer who speaks her mind and, like, you know, isn't a fan of like Jean Smart's character. She's not some old fan of hers, and she's been performing. She had a sitcom in the 70s. The little mannerisms in their faces when they react to something each other has said, really good stuff. And you know, you get that Jean Smart's character has a bit of a temper. There's some backstory with her ex-husband that's kind of brought up a couple of times. And when that's kind of used, again, when that's, you know, because we know about this for a lot of the episodes, so when Ava is finally kind of unleashing a little bit when she's sort of like fighting with her, when she finally brings up some of this personal stuff that we'd had hinted at throughout the episode, it feels like a big moment, and it almost feels like Jean Smart's character respects her. You know, Deborah, that's her character's name. She respects her because she was willing to go there, and because what she said was actually kind of funny. And yeah, so Jean Smart doesn't want to write her, but ultimately they're going to. That's the premise of the show. Like, even though technically that's the end of the episode, it's her decision to say, okay, you're hired. That's not a spoiler because that's the whole premise of the show, and that's, you know, this happens a lot with pilots where the main point of the pilot isn't a spoiler because it's what the whole log line of the show is. That's just they're getting there. But it's successful in making me be entertained by these two characters. I won't be reviewing any more of this because I don't tend to review like half-hour comedies. That there's usually just not much they say. Like telling you like this, does it work? Is it funny? Are the characters interesting? Those are the things that matter. And it does. It works here, and it's effective, and I was laughing. So I would recommend checking out Hacks on HBO Max. It's pretty good from one episode. Now, am I going to watch the rest of the season because I like this first episode? I think I probably might, actually. I don't know when. I may not watch it immediately, but it's on my radar now. Like, I think I will casually watch this at some point. I had a good time. So, Hacks episode 1. Not bad. Not half bad. So I'll give just a brief spoiler warning here and just do a quick couple of lines that I liked because I thought they were good. So I mentioned the Shooter McGavin scene. He's telling Jean Smart that she's getting her dates cut. And he's explaining why. One of the things he's doing is he's explaining that, okay, like all of the clientele we have here in Vegas, they kind of fall into two camps. We have the young 20-somethings that want, whatever young people are into. I think he says to watch someone press play on an iPod, which is actually kind of a really well written line. Because if you think about that line, so the joke is that he's sort of critiquing like a DJ or someone who just sort of like manipulates music or something like that. He says presses play on an iPod. What's funny about that line is that the iPod itself, whilst relatively new in the grand scheme of technology, is actually already old. And like we've moved on from the iPod. Like standalone MP3 players have basically just died because phones can do that. Which is just to say that it's just a simple little thing, but when you stop and think about that line for a second, he's actually also a little out of touch with the way he's explaining it, even though you get the point he's making. It works, but that's actually a nice little joke that's layered within the joke. So I appreciate that. But anyway, so he explains that, and then the other camp is like families who come to Vegas, and they come for singing and dancing and more family friendly fare. So your sort of type of stand-up comedy, which we see examples of in the episode, which is mostly jokes about men and sex jokes and stuff like that. Doesn't really work. And Gene Smart's response to this line is, you're forgetting about the third camp. People from Florida, they love me. And I'm not going to lie, that really made me laugh. The idea of like, Florida as a retirement community and that all of her fans are old people is in there. The idea of Floridians, if I'm saying that right, it worked for me. It's one of those things where I shouldn't really know like this reputation that Florida has, but the internet over the last few years has definitely kind of given me this impression. So her saying that and saying, no, we have visitors from Florida, and I'm a hit with it, really made me laugh. I thought that was a good joke. I wasn't expecting that line. It was good stuff. There's some other good little ones in here or there. Later on, Ava has a scene where she's ordered some food from Postmates, and she looks at the delivery guy after she's been feeling sad looking at some photos of an old girlfriend, it looked like, and she's going to ask him for sex, so that's what it's leading up to. But the actual scene that it cuts to is like after a couple of minutes, it wasn't that long, but a couple of seconds of kissing in bed, he's like, hey, do you have a condom? And she's like, oh, I think so. And she's been packing up her place, right? She's moving out. So she's moved in. Either way, she's got everything in boxes. And he's like, you got a condom. And she starts like, oh, I think so. And she jumps up and she's in her underwear and she's sort of like untaping boxes and trying to like dig through. And she's getting frustrated because all the boxes in her bedroom have got kitchen stuff in them. It's like, why is the kitchen stuff in the bedroom? So I assume she's moved in then. The idea of the movers have just moved boxes into the wrong place. And this might sound amusing right now, but what made it really funny to me is the entire time this is happening, it's like cutting back to the guy in bed, and he's just kind of sitting there with his hand under the sheet, keeping himself going. So there's just like a sort of bobbing up and down under the covers as he's making small talk about the stuff that she's like looking at or whatever. I actually thought there was going to be more of a joke at the end, and I actually kind of respect its restraint for not doing the he has an orgasm before she gets back to bed or something like that. Like I thought maybe it was going that way because he was staring at her and going, oh, you look so hot, and he's like chugging away. I'm glad it didn't do that. I actually think it showed some restraint by just having it then cut to the morning, and it just it still played out normally well enough. It didn't go absurd with the comedy. It just gave you this weird slice of life moment of like him keeping himself erect while she's like pulling out kitchen appliances and cables and shit from the boxes, but never did like the over the top like comedy thing of like having the big American Pie whoopsie daisy kind of ending. So yeah, this is good. And then the two characters finally meet. Actually, no. This the final bit of that was that when her manager calls her the next day and says, "I tried to call you last night." She says, "Sorry, I was effing my postmate," which is just an absurd sentence that just that's one you could kind of see it coming, but it was still really funny because it was just such a weird line. But yeah, then once they meet, like there's a lot of flying back and forth. She calls her a hack, so the title of the show kind of gets in there. She calls Jean Smart a hack, and Jean Smart starts critiquing her bullshit, and that she's dressed like she looks like she's wearing chimney boots because she's got big boots on. And it all boils up to the line that references to her ex-husband, who has just passed away over the course of the episode. And she says, I'm starting to see why your ex-husband left you for your sister. And that kind of finally shuts her up, and she is able to finally walk it because she's told her to leave like 5 minutes ago, but they've been sniping at each other, and what's so good about the scene, right? Even though I think the joke, which is like her tweet that got her in trouble, where she joked about some senator who was sending his son to conversion therapy and calling him a hypocrite, she had some joke about that. The joke that they get to by the time like the end, when Jean Smart chases her down the road to like finish this joke off. Honestly, the joke itself's not that funny, but what I really liked about this whole meeting was that once they did start sniping back and forth, it was getting funnier and funnier, and it was like them, and not so funny in so much that there was like laugh out loud like over and over again for us, the audience, but it was very witty consistently, and it was kind of that thing where you could sort of see why over the course of this conversation Jean Smart was going to recognize something in her, whether she recognized a younger version of herself, whether she recognizes just how talented this writer is, whatever it may be. You could tell that there was going to be an impression left because of the way that she was holding her own in this fight with her. It's almost like Jean Smart, often snaps at people, will often get witty with people. In fact, Dee from It's Always Sunny's her daughter, and like showed up for like a second, and no one really keeps on their toes with her. They just kind of like argue with her like a normal person and yell and swear. This felt more like, oh no, Ava's the first person who's going tit for tat with her, and like she's impressed, and that's why she hires her at the end of the episode. So as an episode to introduce the setup of the show, to introduce the two main characters and why you should be interested in more of it or be excited, it did a good job. So check out Hacks if you haven't. I thought it was pretty funny. But there you go. That is Hacks episode 1. Let me know what you thought of the episode and the show. In fact, if you may have watched the whole thing, it came out 7 months ago. So go and have a look in the comments and say what you thought. Like, subscribe, ding the bell, notifications, all that stuff. Helps us out a lot on YouTube if you hit all those buttons. And of course, you can go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support everything we do for as little as $1 per month and help keep all the content coming. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?